Part 1. The Judgment Ambassador. Elena Vasquez stood alone in the center of the massive chamber. The walls stretched up so high that she could not see the ceiling. Around her, 12 alien beings sat on floating platforms, each one representing a different species that ruled the galaxy. Their eyes, tentacles, and glowing forms all focused on her with cold judgment. The space station called New Geneva orbited a dead star at the edge of Council space. Humans had built it 50 years ago as their first diplomatic outpost. Elena remembered the hope they all felt back then. Today that hope was dying. Ambassador Vasquez, the voice echoed through the chamber. It came from a creature made of shifting gas and light, a Zephyrian prosecutor. You stand accused of leading your species in crimes against the galactic preservation protocols. Elena kept her back straight. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times, but nothing had prepared her for the weight of 12 ancient civilizations staring down at her. I am here to defend humanity's actions, honored council. The prosecutor's form flickered with what Elena had learned was anger. Defense? Your species has spread across 300 star systems in just 2 centuries. You terraform planets without permission. You strip mine asteroids that were marked as protected. Most serious of all, you have begun changing primitive species without our approval. Holographic displays materialized around Elena. They showed human colonies on dozens of worlds. Ships moving between stars, massive factories on airless moons, cities rising from alien soil. To human eyes, it looked like progress. To the council, it looked like destruction. The Kethmori homeworld, the prosecutor continued, pointing to one image. Your colonists found an intelligent species that had not yet developed spaceflight. Instead of reporting them to us, you began teaching them technology. You gave them medicine that extended their lifespans. You helped them build cities. This is strictly forbidden. Elena's jaw tightened. The Kethmori were dying from a plague. We had the cure. Were we supposed to watch them go extinct? Yes, came a new voice. This one belonged to Judge Kirathi, the eldest member of the council. The alien looked like a massive tree made of crystal, its 6 eyes glowing with the light of millennia. That is exactly what you were supposed to do. The natural development of species cannot be interrupted. This is the foundation of galactic law. We were never given the complete preservation protocols. Elena shot back. Humanity received only basic guidelines. We didn't know which systems were protected. We didn't know about half the species you claim we interfered with. A sound like grinding metal came from Judge Kirathi, the equivalent of laughter. Ignorance is not an excuse for 300 violations of galactic law. Your species expands too fast, takes too much, and changes too much. You are dangerous to the stability we have maintained for 50,000 years. Elena looked around the chamber. Some of the council members seemed uncertain. The younger species that had joined more recently shifted uncomfortably on their platforms. But the ancient ones, Kirathi, the Zephyrians, the Fourth Empire, their decision was already made. You want to know what's really dangerous? Elena's voice carried across the vast space. Watching civilizations die when you could save them. Leaving worlds empty when they could support billions of lives. Your stability comes at the cost of progress itself. Silence, Judge Kirathi's voice boomed. You have been weighed and found wanting. The sentence of this council is exile. Complete and permanent exile. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She had expected this, but hearing it still felt like falling into a dark pit. Judge Kirathi continued. Humanity has 30 standard years to withdraw all colonies. Stations and military vessels from council space. You will retreat beyond the outer rim, into the empty dark where your chaos cannot harm ordered civilization. Any human ship found in our territory after the deadline will be destroyed without warning. You're making a mistake, Elena said quietly. Her voice carried clearly in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. Humanity doesn't give up easily. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars that would have ended weaker species. You think exile will break us? We think it will teach you humility, the Zephyrian prosecutor replied. Out there in the darkness with no planets to exploit and no species to corrupt, you will learn the value of what you have lost. Elena smiled, and something in that expression made several council members lean back on their platforms. You know what you've really done here today? You've set us free. The broadcast went out immediately to every human world and station. Elena watched the reactions on her personal communicator as the shuttle carried her away from New Geneva. Some colonies erupted in riots. Others fell silent with shock. But on world after world, She saw something else. The same fire that had driven humans to reach for the stars in the first place. On New Mars, colonists were already loading supply ships. The mining stations around Jupiter began moving their equipment onto transport vessels. Military commanders activated emergency protocols that had been secretly prepared for exactly this scenario. Humanity had learned from history. Always have an escape plan. Admiral Marcus Chen's face appeared on Elena's screen. The graying military leader looked tired but determined. Elena, we're starting the Great Withdrawal immediately. Every human asset will be beyond the rim in 29 years. But we're not going quietly. What do you mean? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew. Dr. Kim's teams have been copying alien databases for months. We're taking everything we've learned about their technology, their biology, their weaknesses. Captain Martinez's ghost ships are already establishing supply caches in the dark nebulae. And we've got allies, species that remember what it was like before the Council controlled everything. Elena nodded. This had been planned for decades, ever since humans first encountered the rigid hierarchy of galactic civilization. They had hoped for acceptance, worked for integration, but deep down they had always known it might come to this. Admiral, she said, make sure our people understand something. This isn't defeat. This is evolution. They think exile will humble us, but they don't understand what they've just done. What's that? Elena looked out the shuttle's viewport at the galaxy that had rejected them. Trillions of stars spread across space, most of them beyond Council control. Most of them waiting for someone bold enough to claim them. They've removed the leash, she said. For 200 years we've been trying to follow their rules, work within their system, prove we deserve a place at their table. Now we don't have to. Now we can build something better. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying Elena toward the human core worlds where the real work would begin. Behind them, New Geneva Station went dark as the last human personnel evacuated. The Council had made their judgment, imposed their sentence. They would spend the next 30 years learning exactly how badly they had miscalculated. In the depths of space, beyond the reach of Council sensors, ships were already moving. Humans had been preparing for this day since they first met alien civilization. They had studied, learned, adapted, and planned. Now, with nothing left to lose and everything to prove, they would show the galaxy what happened when you told humanity it didn't belong. The age of asking for permission was over. The age of taking what they needed was about to begin, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the outer rim, an empire was waiting to be born. Part 2. The Great Withdrawal. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Indomitable, watching the largest evacuation in human history unfold before his eyes. Hundreds of ships moved between the stars, each one carrying thousands of people away from homes they had known for generations. The holographic display showed the scope of it all. 300 colonies being abandoned, 47 space stations being stripped down, entire worlds going dark as their populations fled into exile. Status report, Chen ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of what they were doing. Colony ships are 60% loaded. Sir, reported Commander Sarah Kim, head of the Terra Institute. Her teams had been working around the clock to salvage everything valuable from the abandoned settlements. We're prioritizing genetic samples, cultural archives, and technological databases. The Council may be kicking us out, but we're not leaving empty-handed. Chen nodded. Every human world was doing the same thing, copying alien technology, downloading restricted databases, and recruiting sympathetic aliens who were willing to defect from Council space. The operation had been planned in secret for decades, ever since humanity first realized how restrictive Council laws really were. The main screen shifted to show the surface of New California, a world that had been home to 80 million humans. Cities that had taken a century to build were being systematically dismantled. Factories were being broken down into transportable components. Even the parks and gardens were being harvested. Every earth plant and tree that had been brought across the void to make this alien world livable. It breaks your heart to see it, said Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had returned from the Council trial just days before. She stood beside Chen, watching families load their entire lives onto transport shuttles. Some of these people were born here. Their grandparents were buried in that soil, which is why we're taking soil samples from every world, Chen replied. Someday we'll plant new gardens, build new cities. The Council thinks they're ending our expansion. They're just redirecting it. The evacuation wasn't just about moving people. Deep in the asteroid belts and hidden nebulae, a different operation was taking place. Captain Rosa Martinez commanded what they called the Ghost Fleet, ships that officially didn't exist, crews that had volunteered to be erased from all records. Her job was to establish supply caches and listening posts in the dark spaces between Council territory and the Outer Rim. Martinez's ship, the Shadow Dancer, dropped out of hyperspace near a rogue planet drifting in the void between stars. No sun warmed its surface, but its core was still hot enough to hide their energy signatures from Council sensors, perfect for a supply depot. "Start unloading the fusion reactors," Martinez ordered her crew. "I want manufacturing equipment, food synthesizers, and enough raw materials to build a small fleet. If any human ships make it out here in the next few years, they'll need supplies." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Park, frowned at the sensor readings. "Captain, there's something you should see. That's not just rock and ice down there. I'm reading metal structures buried under the surface." Martinez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold planet below. Ancient ruins? Maybe. Or maybe we're not the first species the Council has exiled to the empty dark. The discovery sent shockwaves through the evacuation fleet. If other species had been cast out before humanity, what had happened to them? Were they still out there surviving in the darkness? Could they become allies or enemies? Dr. Kim's research teams worked frantically to analyze the ruins. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about galactic history. The structures were clearly artificial, built by beings with advanced technology. But they were old, thousands of years old, and they had been abandoned in a hurry. "This was a military installation," Dr. Kim reported to Admiral Chen. "Weapons testing, ship construction, maybe even genetic research. Someone was building an army out here. What happened to them? Unknown. But the architecture matches some of the older species in Council space. I think the Council has been exiling rebellious civilizations for millennia. The question is whether any of them survived long enough to build something worth finding." The answer came 3 weeks later when Captain Martinez's exploration team found the first intact facility, deep underground, powered by geothermal energy. A massive complex stretched through the planet's crust. Most of it was empty, but in the deepest chambers they found something that made Chen immediately order a classified lockdown of all information. They found aliens. Living aliens. The Vorthon engineer called itself Kexhi, and it had been waiting in suspended animation for over 2,000 years. Its species had been among the first to challenge Council authority, and they had paid the price. Exiled to the darkness, hunted down by Council fleets nearly extinct. Kexhi was one of only a few dozen survivors who had gone into stasis, hoping that someday someone would find them and give them a chance to strike back. "Your species," Kexhi said in halting but understandable human language. "They exile you for same reasons they exile us. Too fast growth, too much change, too dangerous to their control." Dr. Kim leaned forward, her excitement barely contained. "You've been studying them for thousands of years. You know their weaknesses." Kexhi's forearms gestured, and what humans were learning was agreement. Know their technology, know their tactics, know their fear. They scared of species that adapt faster than their laws can control. That why they exile. That why they hunt. That why they destroy. "But you survived," Admiral Chen pointed out. "We survive because we learn. We build better ships in secret places. We make new technology from old knowledge. We wait for others like us to find us." Kexhi paused, looking at the humans around it. "You not first species they exile. You not be last. But maybe you be first to fight back and win." The aliens' knowledge was incredible. Kexhi knew about quantum tunnel drives that could move ships faster than Council vessels. It understood biological sciences that could extend lifespans and enhance human capabilities. Most importantly, it knew the locations of other exile communities, species that had been cast out over the millennia and had learned to survive in the darkness. As the Great Withdrawal continued, a new plan began to form. Humanity wasn't just evacuating. They were making contact with every exiled species they could find, building alliances with the outcasts and rebels that the Council had tried to erase from history, creating a network of civilizations that had all learned the same hard lesson about galactic politics. The Council thought they were sending humanity into empty space to die alone. Instead, they were sending them into a community of survivors who had been waiting thousands of years for someone with the resources and determination to mount a real challenge to Council authority. Captain James Okafor commanded the colony ship Magellan, carrying 50,000 refugees toward the Outer Rim. As his ship made the final hyperspace jump that would take them beyond Council space forever, he gathered his passengers in the Great Assembly Hall. "Look around you," he told them. "These are the faces of the future. Not just human future, but the future of every species that refuses to bow to the Council's idea of order. They think exile is punishment. We're going to prove it's liberation." The crowd cheered, but Okafor held up his hand for silence. "It won't be easy. We're heading into unknown space with limited resources and hostile aliens hunting us. Some of us won't survive what's coming, but those who do will build something the galaxy has never seen before. A civilization based on freedom instead of control." As the Magellan jumped to hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future, Captain Okafor made a promise that would echo through the years ahead. "We'll be back, and when we return, we won't be asking for permission anymore." Behind them, the last human stations went dark. Ahead of them, in the vast darkness beyond the galactic rim, an empire was waiting to be born. The Council had made their choice. Now they would live with the consequences. Part 3. Seeds in the Darkness. Commander Lisa Park wiped sweat from her forehead as she watched the first human-built starship roll out of the construction bay. 15 years had passed since the Great Withdrawal, and the desert world of New Olympus had become something no one expected, the heart of a growing empire. The ship before her looked nothing like the vessels that had carried humanity into exile. Where human ships had once been bulky and practical, this one was sleek and dangerous. Its hull gleamed with alien metals that the Vorthon engineer Kexhai had taught them to forge. Energy conduits glowed beneath transparent armor plates. Weapon ports lined its sides like the teeth of a predator. "What are we calling her?" asked Chief Engineer Martinez, Rosa's younger brother who had followed the family tradition of building things that weren't supposed to exist. "Defiance," Park replied. "Seems appropriate." The shipyard around them hummed with activity. Humans worked alongside Vorthons, Kethmori, and a dozen other species that had found their way to the free territories. Each group brought their own knowledge and skills. The Vorthons understood quantum physics better than any Council species. The Kethmori had mastered biological engineering. A race of crystalline beings called the Shard had developed manufacturing techniques that could build components at the molecular level. Dr. Sarah Kim arrived on the observation deck. Her hair now streaked with gray, but her eyes still bright with scientific curiosity. "Lisa, you need to see the latest test results from the quantum tunnel drive." They walked through corridors that had been carved from solid rock by mining equipment salvaged from human colonies. New Olympus had no oceans, few plants, and temperatures that could kill an unprotected human in minutes. But it had something more valuable. It was completely invisible to Council sensors, hidden in a nebula that interfered with their detection systems. In Dr. Kim's laboratory, holographic displays showed test results that would have been impossible under Council law. The quantum tunnel drive didn't just move ships faster than light. It moved them through dimensions that bypassed normal space entirely. A ship could jump from one side of the galaxy to the other in hours instead of months. The Vorthons had the theory, Dr. Kim explained, but they never had the manufacturing capability to build the focusing crystals. The Shard can grow crystals with perfect atomic structure. Combined with human engineering and Kethmori biological computers, we've created something that surpasses anything in Council space. Park studied the data with growing excitement. "How many ships can we equip with this technology?" "The bottleneck is the crystals. The Shard can only grow about 12 per year with their current facilities. But each crystal can power a Dreadnought-class vessel. In 5 years, we could have a fleet that matches anything the Council can field. And they won't see us coming until we're already there." Park added with satisfaction, the free territories had grown beyond anything the refugees had dared hope. What started as scattered exile communities had become a network of hidden worlds and secret bases. Each settlement specialized in different technologies and resources. Some focused on ship construction, others on weapons development, still others on the genetic enhancement programs that were slowly improving human capabilities. The population had grown too, not just from births but from defections. Every year, more aliens abandoned Council space to join the growing alliance. Some came seeking freedom from restrictive laws. Others came fleeing persecution for their beliefs or their species' history. A few came simply because they were curious about what humanity was building out in the darkness. Today's arrivals included a group that made Park particularly happy. A full crew of hegemony engineers who had stolen their ship and fled Council space. The hegemony was one of the Council's most advanced species, masters of energy weapons and shield technology. Having them join the free territories was like gaining a century of weapons research in a single day. "Commander Park," came a voice from her communicator. "Priority message from Admiral Chen." Park activated her secure channel. Chen's weathered face appeared on the screen, speaking from his flagship somewhere in the outer systems. The old admiral looked tired but determined. "Lisa, we've got a situation. Council patrol ship stumbled across one of our mining operations in the Kepler system. They're demanding surrender and threatening to call for reinforcements." Park felt her stomach tighten. This was what they had all been dreading. First contact with Council forces since the exile. If the patrol ship escaped and reported back, it could bring a fleet down on the free territories. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Chen was quiet for a moment, weighing options that could determine the fate of humanity's future. "We can't let them report back. But we also can't just murder them. That would make us no better than the Council claims we are. What's the alternative? We show them what we've become. Let them make their own choice about which side of history they want to be on." The operation that followed became legendary in free territory history. The Council patrol ship Harmony's Edge thought it was dealing with the same desperate refugees they had exiled 15 years ago. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by vessels that appeared from nowhere, using technology that shouldn't exist, and coordinated by tactics no Council species had ever seen. Captain Veltar of the Harmony's Edge was a veteran, officer of the Saurian Navy. He had served the Council for 40 years and had never seen anything like the ships that materialized around his vessel. They were clearly human in design, but they moved like living things and their weapons glowed with energy signatures that his sensors couldn't identify. "Unknown vessels," he broadcast on standard frequencies. "You are in violation of your exile terms. Surrender immediately or face the consequences." The response came not from one ship, but from all of them in perfect synchronization. "Captain Veltar, this is Admiral Chen of the Free Fleet. Your exile expired the day you cast us out. This is our space now and you're trespassing." What happened next would be studied by military analysts for generations. The human ships didn't attack, they demonstrated. They showed capabilities that made the Harmony's Edge look like a primitive toy, shields that absorbed energy weapons completely, engines that allowed impossibly tight maneuvers, weapons that could have vaporized the Council ship, but instead traced harmless patterns around its hull. "Your choice, Captain," Chen broadcasted. "Return to Council space with a message or stay and learn what freedom actually means." Captain Veltar stared at his tactical displays in shock. His ship was completely outmatched, but the humans weren't destroying it. They were offering options. In 40 years of Council service, he had never seen an enemy show mercy to someone who couldn't fight back. "What message?" he asked. "Tell the Council that humanity survived. Tell them we're not the same species they exiled. Tell them that exile taught us something they never understood. How to unite different peoples under a common cause instead of ruling them through fear." 3 hours later, the Harmony's Edge jumped back to Council space, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic government. But they left behind something more important: 12 crew members who chose to abandon their oaths and join the Free Fleet. Commander Park watched the defectors being welcomed at New Olympus Spaceport. Each one brought knowledge of current Council technology, troop movements, and political situations. But more than that, they brought proof that the exile was working exactly opposite to how the Council intended. Instead of humbling humanity, it had freed them to become something greater. Instead of isolating them, it had united them with every other species that had ever been oppressed by Council rule. Instead of weakening them, it had made them stronger than they had ever been within the constraints of galactic law. "Admiral Chen wants all fleet commanders to report to the Indomitable tomorrow," Dr. Kim said as she joined Park on the observation deck. "Apparently, it's time to discuss our next phase of operations." Park nodded, watching the stars beyond the nebula that hid their growing civilization. Somewhere out there, the Council was receiving word that their exile had failed. Soon they would have to decide how to respond to the news that humanity not only survived, but was thriving. Phase 2, Park said quietly. I wonder if they're ready for what that means. Dr. Kim smiled grimly. I doubt they have any idea what's coming. But they're about to learn that exiling humanity was the worst mistake in galactic history. Above them, ships bearing names like Prometheus Unbound and Second Genesis moved between the stars, carrying weapons and warriors that would soon remind the galaxy what happened when you told humans they didn't belong. Part 4. The return. 25 years had passed since humanity's exile, and the galaxy was burning. Station Commander Raktor watched helplessly as the Convergence fleet tore through Kepler Station's defenses like they were made of paper. The machine intelligence had appeared along the galactic rim 6 months ago, consuming everything in its path with cold efficiency. The Council's response had been slow, bureaucratic, and completely inadequate. Sir, we've lost the outer defensive grid, reported his tactical officer. The machines are adapting to our weapons faster than we can recalibrate them. Raktor's forearms worked frantically at his command console. Kepler Station was more than just a military outpost. It housed the Council's most advanced research facilities and the genetic archives of 47 species. If it fell, thousands of years of scientific progress would be lost. All vessels, fall back to defensive perimeter 3, he ordered. Concentrate fire on the lead dreadnought. Maybe we can... His words died as the Convergence flagship fired its main weapon. The beam punched through the station's shields like they didn't exist, vaporizing an entire section in seconds. The screams of the dying echoed through the command center. Sir, his communications officer's voice shook with terror. I'm detecting new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Unknown configuration, but they're big. Raktor pulled up the tactical display, expecting to see more Convergence vessels arriving to finish them off. Instead, his eyes widened in shock. The ships emerging from hyperspace were clearly organic in design, but unlike anything in Council databases. They were angular and predatory, with hull configurations that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Energy readings showed weapon systems that glowed with power signatures he didn't recognize. This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Free Fleet, came a voice across all frequencies. Council forces withdraw to minimum safe distance. We'll handle this. Chen? Raktor whispered. He knew that name from history files, the human admiral who had coordinated the Great Withdrawal. But that was impossible. Humans were extinct, driven into the darkness and forgotten. The newcomer ships moved with impossible grace, accelerating and turning in ways that should have killed their crews from gravitational stress. But as they engaged the Convergence fleet, Raktor realized he was watching something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The machines had adapted to every Council weapon, every Council tactic, every Council strategy, but they had never faced humans before. The Free Fleet ships didn't fight like any species Raktor had ever seen. They moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism with hundreds of bodies. Their weapons didn't fire in predictable patterns. They seemed to anticipate where the machines would move and struck empty space that suddenly wasn't empty anymore. When the Convergence vessels tried to adapt, the human weapons changed too. Energy beams became particle streams, became exotic matter projectiles, became things that Raktor's sensors couldn't even identify. It was like watching a chess game where one player could change the rules with every move. The battle lasted 3 days. By the time it was over, the Convergence fleet was nothing but debris drifting through space. And the Free Fleet hung motionless among the stars like sleeping predators. Admiral Chen's face appeared on Raktor's main screen. The human looked older than the historical records, his hair now completely white, but his eyes held the same determination that had carried humanity through their exile. Station Commander, Chen said formally, your facility is secure. My medical teams are standing by to assist with casualties. Raktor struggled to process what had just happened. Admiral, we thought humans were extinct. The Council pronounced your species dead 5 years after the exile. There were no signals from beyond the rim, no survivors found. Chen's expression didn't change. We got very good at hiding. Your exile taught us the value of invisibility. But how? How did you build ships like this? How did you develop technology that surpasses anything in Council space? By working with people the Council threw away, Chen replied. Turns out, when you stop trying to control every aspect of technological development, progress happens a lot faster. The implications hit Raktor like a physical blow. If humans had survived and built this kind of fleet, What did that mean for the Council's authority? What did it mean for the species that had voted for their exile? Admiral, Raktor said carefully, the Council will want to speak with you. There are questions about your legal status, your territorial claims, your... The Council, Chen interrupted, can speak with our diplomatic corps, but they should understand something first. We're not the same humans you exiled. 25 years in the darkness changed us. We learned to work with species you oppressed. We developed technologies you banned. We built something you said was impossible, a civilization based on cooperation instead of control. Chen's image flickered for a moment, then stabilized. But right now, none of that matters. The convergence is still out there. They've taken 12 systems and they're not stopping. Your traditional tactics won't work against them. Your command structure is too slow. Your species think too differently to coordinate effectively. What are you suggesting? Joint operations. Human tactics, Council resources. You provide intelligence and logistical support. We provide the fleet that can actually fight these machines. Raktor felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This conversation would determine whether the next chapter was cooperation or war. I don't have authority to make that kind of agreement. Then get someone who does, Chen said bluntly. Because the convergence will be here again in 6 months with a bigger fleet. Next time, you won't have 3 days to debate policy. The transmission ended, leaving Raktor staring at empty space where the most advanced fleet he had ever seen waited for an answer. Around him, his crew worked to repair systems that had been saved by the very species they had helped exile. News of the Battle of Kepler Station spread across Council space like wildfire. Some species welcomed humanity's return as salvation from the convergence threat. Others saw it as an invasion disguised as rescue. The political consequences were immediate and severe. The younger species, those that had joined the Council in recent millennia, began questioning why they had supported the exile. If humans could build technology that surpassed Council science, what else had the ancient races been hiding from them? What other capabilities had been suppressed in the name of stability? The ancient races responded with their own concerns. If humanity had survived and thrived outside Council authority, what did that say about the necessity of their guidance? How many other exiled species might still be out there, building their own alternatives to galactic government? But the biggest shock came when the full scope of the Free Fleet was revealed. Intelligence reports painted a picture that terrified Council leadership, not just humans, but dozens of species working together with shared technology and unified command structures. The exile hadn't isolated humanity. It had allowed them to build the coalition that the Council's rigid hierarchy made impossible. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now bearing the title Prime Ambassador of the Free Territories, stood in the same chamber where she had been condemned 25 years earlier. But this time she wasn't alone. Representatives from 37 different species stood with her, each one carrying the flag of their adopted home in the darkness beyond the rim. Honored Council, she began, her voice carrying the same steel that had sustained humanity through exile. We return not as supplicants, but as equals. We offer partnership in the fight against the convergence, but only as partners. The days of taking orders from this chamber are over. Judge Karathi, now ancient beyond measure, leaned forward on his crystal throne. You forget your place, human. This council has maintained order for 50,000 years. Your brief success does not erase the necessity of authority. Elena smiled, and in that expression lay the promise of everything that was about to change. Your Honor, with respect, our success isn't brief. It's just beginning. Outside the council chambers, the Free Fleet waited among the stars. Ships with names like Retribution and Phoenix Rising hung in space beside vessels from a dozen allied species. They carried weapons that could shatter planets and warriors who had learned to fight as one people despite their many origins. The age of exile was ending. The age of return had begun. And the galaxy would never be the same. Part 5. A new galaxy. Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of New Geneva Station, marveling at how different it looked from her memories. 30 years ago, she had left this place in defeat, carrying the weight of humanity's exile. Today, she returned as Prime Ambassador of the Free Territories, accompanied by representatives from dozens of species that had found new hope in the darkness. The council chamber had been rebuilt since her last visit, expanded to accommodate the growing number of species that demanded representation. But the ancient beings still sat on their floating platforms, looking down at the younger races with the same cold authority they had wielded for millennia. Judge Karathi's 6 crystal eyes focused on Elena as she took her place in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Vasquez, you were exiled from this space under penalty of death. Your return violates the terms of your punishment. Your Honor, Elena replied calmly. The terms of our exile expired the moment we saved your species from extinction. Kepler Station would have fallen without our intervention. The Convergence War would have been lost without our fleet. I think that earns us the right to be heard. A ripple of voices filled the chamber. The younger species had been following the reports from the front lines, where human forces fought alongside Council fleets against the machine intelligence. Every battle showed the same pattern. Council tactics failed while human strategies succeeded. It was becoming impossible to ignore the effectiveness of the exile survivors. The question before us today, Elena continued, is not whether humanity deserves to exist. We've proven that we can survive and thrive no matter what obstacles you place in our path. The question is whether this council can adapt to a galaxy that no longer needs its permission to progress. Representative Zexhai of the Vorthon spoke from their platform. Elena recognized the name, a descendant of Kexhai, the engineer who had helped humanity develop their advanced technology. The free territories have shown us possibilities we never imagined. Species working together as equals. Technology shared freely between civilizations. Progress driven by cooperation instead of control. Chaos, Judge Karathi responded sharply. You describe chaos. Without authority, without hierarchy, without the wisdom of experience guiding development, civilizations destroy themselves. We have maintained galactic peace for 50,000 years precisely, because we prevent the kind of reckless expansion your allies represent. Elena activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where the Convergence had attacked. Blue zones showed Council space. But most interesting were the green zones, vast regions beyond the rim where the free territories had established their hidden civilization. Your peace, Elena said, came at the cost of stagnation. Look at this map. The green zones show our territory, nearly a third of the galaxy that you dismissed as empty dark. In 30 years, we've established colonies on thousands of worlds, built trade networks across hundreds of star systems, and created alliances between species you claimed couldn't work together, and brought machine intelligence to our borders, added the Zephyrian prosecutor who had originally condemned humanity. Elena's expression hardened. The Convergence came from the galactic core, not from our territory. They arose in space you control, using technology your species developed. Don't blame us for your failures. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. Intelligence reports had confirmed that the Convergence had originated from a Council research project that escaped containment. The very stability they claimed to maintain had created the threat that nearly destroyed them all. What do you want? Judge Karathi asked finally. Elena gestured to the representatives standing with her. Each one carried the symbol of their species alongside the star and compass emblem of the free territories. We want recognition, not as subjects returning to your authority, but as equals offering partnership. The galaxy is big enough for multiple ways of governance. You're proposing to divide galactic authority, the Kairathi judge said, to fragment the unity that has maintained peace. I'm proposing to acknowledge reality, Elena replied. Your unity was always an illusion. Half the species in Council space are here because they were conquered, not because they chose to join. The other half stay because they're afraid of what you'll do if they leave. That's not unity. It's oppression dressed up in fancy words. A new voice joined the conversation. Ambassador Kethras of the Saurian Navy stepped forward, his scales showing the blue patterns that indicated deep thought. Prime Ambassador Vasquez speaks truth that many of us have felt, but few have dared voice. My people joined the Council after our homeworld was devastated by ancient wars. We were told that only through submission to established authority could we avoid repeating those mistakes. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces both ancient and young. But watching the free territories, we see species that were enemies learning to work together through shared purpose rather than shared fear. Perhaps it is time to admit that our way is not the only way. The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Species after species came forward to share their experiences with Council rule. Some spoke of prosperity and protection. Others described suppression and stagnation. But the pattern that emerged was clear. The younger species wanted change, while the ancient races resisted it. The turning point came when Judge Karathi made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. During a private session with Elena, the ancient being admitted what few had suspected. "You want to know the real reason we exiled humanity?" Kirathi's crystal form pulsed with colors Elena had never seen before. "It wasn't just your expansion or your interference with primitive species. It was what you represented, which was proof that our way was not necessary. For 50,000 years, we've told younger species that they needed our guidance to avoid destroying themselves, that only through submission to ancient wisdom could galactic civilization survive. But you humans, you showed that cooperation could work better than control, that innovation could happen without our permission, that diversity could create strength instead of chaos." Elena felt a moment of sympathy for the ancient being. "You were afraid we would inspire others to leave." "We were terrified," Karathi admitted. "If other species realized they didn't need us, what would become of the order we've spent millennia building?" "Something better," Elena said quietly. "Something that includes everyone instead of just the powerful." 3 months later, the Galactic Compact was signed in the same chamber where humanity had been condemned. But the document that emerged bore little resemblance to the old Council Charter. Instead of hierarchy, it established cooperation. Instead of control, it guaranteed freedom. Instead of ancient wisdom ruling over younger species, it created a system where every civilization had an equal voice. The free territories remained independent, but they opened their borders to any species that wanted to join them. The traditional council space continued under a reformed government that still provided stability, but no longer claimed absolute authority. And between them, dozens of smaller alliances formed as species found new ways to work together. Elena stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching ships from 100 different civilizations move peacefully through space. Human vessels worked alongside Vorthan science ships. Kethmori colony transports traveled with Saurian escorts. Former enemies had become partners in exploration and trade. Admiral Chen joined her at the viewport, his hair now completely white but his eyes still sharp. "Any regrets about how it all turned out?" Elena considered the question seriously. 30 years ago, she had watched her species being driven into exile, their dreams of galactic acceptance shattered. Today, humans were respected throughout known space, not as subjects of the Council but as leaders of their own destiny. "No regrets," she said finally. "If the Council had accepted us originally, we would have spent centuries trying to fit into their system. We never would have discovered what we were really capable of, and we never would have met our allies," Chen added, watching a group of mixed-species crews working together on a nearby construction project. "The Vorthans, the Kethmori, the Shard, all the others. They made us stronger than we ever could have been alone." Elena nodded. The greatest victory hadn't been proving the Council wrong about humanity. It had been proving that exile could become evolution. That being cast out could be the first step toward finding your true home among the stars. A communication alert interrupted her thoughts. Captain Martinez's voice came through the station's speakers. "Prime Ambassador, we're receiving a signal from the deep surveys. Long-range sensors have detected artificial structures in the Andromeda galaxy. They're definitely not convergence technology." Elena and Chen exchanged glances. Andromeda, the nearest galaxy, 2 million light-years away. If there were civilizations there and if humanity's quantum tunnel technology could reach that far. "Looks like the next chapter is about to begin," Chen said with a grin. Elena smiled back, feeling the same excitement that had driven humans to reach for the stars in the first place. The Milky Way had been just the beginning. Beyond its borders lay infinite possibilities, waiting for species brave enough to seek them out.